speaking here from the United States. And so whether that is cost, whether that is simply having the ability in your crazy week or your busy lives to get to your doctor, to get that prescription, to get educated on that, to get educated on the dose, maybe that dose doesn't work correctly, and so therefore you're nervous to use it, or whether it's a variety of other medications or test strips. But it sounds like we each have these individual challenges. And, Payne, I think that you're bringing up a great point, and that's while these challenges may be individual, and we might not fully understand why they're so complicated because we're in different parts of the world, and there's like 4 or 5 different problems or challenges or hurdles. And so I think that from there, it might be somewhat disempowering in itself, where, maybe we should be more vocal about that at an individual level and really come together as a collective to find out, hey, you have the same challenge as I do, and that's simply affording insulin. And I'm here in the United States and you're in England or Australia or Singapore. Well, let's now talk about that at your local level, and now think of it at a regional level. And then if there really are those similarities at a global level, then we ought to be in this mission together to ultimately make the world better by removing that hurdle or that obstacle. And so that's what I've seen. I've seen a lot of challenges here. Just simply, they're so individualized. I think it's just Rob Brooks's problem, but the more and more we talk about this, it seems like, almost every person that I'm sure goes to the doctor or my endocrinologist are probably battling with these same challenges. Ashley, do you have any thoughts or comments there?
Thanks, guys. I think my thoughts are quite similar around, what Elizabeth has said around it sort of comes in a whole package. You can't just have access to unlimited insulin without a syringe or, a way to get the insulin actually in you. And at that same point, you also need the education to sort of know how to use that insulin appropriately as well. So, it's the whole saying of the equipment is as good as the person who's using it. So this applies to any sort of diabetes-related technology, whether it be insulin pumps or blood glucose meters. These things all come hand in hand. And again, you also need that support. So when we talk about access, it's not only access to insulin, it is also about access to education, to support, to and also to peers as well. So I think it's not just one topic that we have to focus on, it's the whole thing. So I guess I'm interested to hear from Elizabeth, what can we do as individuals to sort of work on changing this access issue or tackling it on, from a local or regional or even global perspective. And I guess a bit more about what T1 International is doing to work through this as well.
Definitely. I think it's a great segue in as what all of you are talking about, these sort of very sometimes specific, but a lot of overlap as well. So what we're doing at T1 International, we kind of have a 4-part strategy. So really briefly, the first thing, and this is great because you can all do these things individually as well. You can join with what we're doing at T1 International, and you can be sort of active in your own right on whatever level and whatever time commitment you want to be. Just doing something like this, for example, this roundtable, it's raising awareness about the issues. It's getting people to think about things that they might not already think of. Diabetes is a 24/7 self-managed condition for the most part, so it's not that easy sometimes to think outside of ourselves and what other people are dealing with. So that's what we try to do as our first point, is share stories, raise awareness about these issues, try to get as good of an understanding possible about what's going on around the world. We also try to connect people. Ash mentioned one of those key puzzle pieces is support, is connecting with other people living with diabetes. So we're able to connect people around the world either to each other, so individuals get together and sort of start up a support group, or they join in with an existing great initiative that's already going on in their local area. And I think that's so important, because people who are living in a place know their issues and their challenges the best, and working together, they can, come up with advocacy plans and find ways to tackle what their most critical diabetes issue is, as Pei said. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is pushing for research and data. We know that there's just a huge lack of data and research that exists in some parts of the world, particularly in parts of Africa and Southeast Asia. Hardly any prevalence data, so the numbers of people living with type 1 diabetes, for example, are almost non-existent. The most basic understanding of what it's like with the condition in that place. How can you build solutions? So that's a huge important piece of that, is getting that information out there. And then finally, it's the advocacy and campaigning. That's the final piece. And I think what we've all been talking about today is a great way to sort of, okay, it's overwhelming when you look at the big problems and you look at the global issues, but I think the way Rob framed it is really positive in that we find our most pressing issue locally. We also then can connect with people who are dealing with the same issue or something similar. And while everything's very different, one of the bonuses about having this global diabetes community, particularly when it comes to access, is you can share best practice and say, well, we want the government to, have them create a stipend for people to make their insulin cheaper, and we want to do this in this other country. Here's some of the stumbling blocks. Here's some take from each other, and that's just a huge way that advocacy can be so much more powerful. So we have an advocacy toolkit that we research all of you as a first step to have a look at that, decide what your one issue is that you want to tackle, and we can connect you to other people working on that same issue, so you're not alone in anything that you want to do. And yeah, get in touch with us if you have any more questions about that, because it was a very whirlwind tour of what we're doing.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And yeah, really hoping to get into now kind of what we can do. But before we do that, I see that we have a few questions here specific for you, and they're tough ones, so get ready. So what are your thoughts on the lawsuit against pharma in the USA that is currently a hot topic? And do you think the outcome might be and potentially affect access to insulin globally? From Stephanie.
Great questions. So I think, the more we're seeing more and more momentum of people speaking out about the crazy exorbitant high cost of insulin in the US. So to see the lawsuit coming out I think is a positive thing. It's, we're not legal experts at T1 International, but it's always positive, I think, to see it's patients with diabetes. They're being represented by law. They are speaking out about, this is the damages I've suffered. This is why it's not okay for the costs to be so high. And from what I understand from the legal team, the hope is it will at least be the start of impacting access to insulin in the US, but also around the globe. The US in some ways can set precedents for the rest of the world, but I was talking about transparency earlier. I don't know that this lawsuit will, force all pharmaceutical companies to reveal their costing information and their price setting, but I think it can very much hold their feet to the fire a little bit to show that, people are looking at this, people are going to try to hold you accountable for high prices, and we're going to try to stop any of these sort of potentially illegal practices that are happening, which if it comes to that will certainly affect how pricing works in the rest of the world, I think, or it can impact it at the very least.